And how much time do you think a new developer joining a company needs to actually be productive and actually be contributing to doing something valuable?
Oh, that's a really good. It really depends on the people, but one thing that I like to implement is a 30, 60, 90 plan. I'm sure that's ubiquitous across the industry, but it's a 90-day plan where the value of the organization's contributions to you match your contributions somehow, right? And that's where those like lines kind of converge right around 90 days, and that's when it should happen. And so I think faster would be better. Like I can talk a little bit about my personal 30, 60, 90 plan, but I think
Yeah,
within
please.
yeah, so regardless of experience, whether you're a junior, senior, or whatever, you should have a PR out your first 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
First 2 weeks. Yep. And doesn't have to be a crazy PR. You know, there's some spelling mistakes in README files. Learn how to do
Right.
that. Like, I'm not talking anything crazy. I'm saying like find an issue and fix it and push it. And so most of the people that I hire, if they're like very junior or whatever, they'll do their first commit will be like, oh, I went through this like the quick start guide in the README file and it was wrong. So I'm going to fix it for you and I'll push it, and that's my first commit. And then we all celebrate, you know, oh yay. So that's like the first 2 weeks. Lots of learning and stuff. I try to instill that like you don't need to change the world in your first month. Like just learn. And you know, you want to guide that individual to like ask questions. Like I'm very remote, you know, I think remote is kind of the way to go, but regardless, you want to have them get into a habit of asking questions in public channels. So every day, meeting with developers and pairing with them every day. So in their first 2 weeks to a month, you know, it's all this collaboration with people and just like watching people code, pair programming, all that kind of stuff, and fixing things is much as you can. By after 2 weeks, we start giving them tickets. Like we're really quick with that, and I think that pushing people in the water is a really good way to see like how well they can swim. The problem with that is that if you realize they're drowning, save them, and you know push them in a smaller pool of water next time. Or if they can totally tackle that, throw them in the deep end, and it's fine. But I think that that's essential to just push somebody in and they came onto your organization to solve problems. Let's do it quickly. So that's right around the first month. The second month, you're really kind of still leaning on people. You're still learning the ropes, but you're starting to do regular commits. You're starting to do regular changes, but you might not be like, maybe if you're junior, you might be taking like 2.5 times the time it takes you to do a feature to write unit tests or something like that. And or it's like taking you a lot harder to learn the domain, and that's totally acceptable. Right after like 90 days is where you should start to be autonomous. And autonomous means not knowing everything. It means being able to solve problems by yourself using the resources available to you. So if you know that Dave over there is the expert in this field, by 90 days you should know that go reach out to Dave and solve this problem. And own it. Ownership is something that should be pretty obvious after the second week.
Wow, this is awesome. Like 30, 60, 90. I think a lot of companies can learn from this. I absolutely agree with you. And the first 2 weeks thing that you said is actually like, if we actually go into it and break it down, it's not just making a first commit, because yes, you can do maybe update a README file or update a translation file, in English,
Sure.
Spanish, or French. But it's also that in 2 weeks, it is enough time to actually get your code base ready.
Yes.
And in order to push something, you should have everything in your computer set up. All the dependencies, all the necessary softwares are installed, and then you have also finally gone through the whole process of committing something, creating a branch, making a pull request, asking other people to review your code. Then maybe the code will be merged, and finally it will be deployed depending on your staging environment, or eventually it will go to production. So I think it will give a new developer a holistic view of the whole dev culture in the company, which is absolutely awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And how much time do you think a developer needs to actually be able to review other PRs?
Oh, that is a great question too. So part of the 30, 60, 90, I have them doing that within their first month, and regardless of experience, right? So what they'll do is they might not have a lot to say. And you definitely don't want to instill like a culture of where we nitpick at every little thing, because that's also not great. But you want them to be, you want them to to start getting used to the process of reviewing code and what to look for and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's difficult to say. Everyone's really different. I've had, what some might call rock star developers do it really, really quickly and dive in. And others, it takes them a little bit of time. It's hard to put a time frame. I would say the moment you have an opinion that's accurate is the time to start judging people's code.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Talking about PRs, you did a great video on an interview question, which was about like, what do you look for when reviewing a code, when reviewing a PR or a pull request? So I want to ask you, because I mean, reviewing a peer's code is a very integral part of your job as a software developer, right? So you do it even when you're a junior developer, and you also do it when you're a senior developer. So like, what are some key points to look for, or like, what is like your advice in general to people who review a PR, so that they make it a better experience for, like the person that they're reviewing the PR for, so that they get some insight?
Yeah, great question. I think that the first thing you need to remember is that you're talking to a human. Don't ever forget that, like with feelings, and they're trying to be better. And so the whole mood should be, I want you to be better. Here are some things that you probably didn't see, but I want you to be better. And that should be kind of like the motivating factor. I think tone is very important. And you just need to go to like some open source repos and see how people review like pull requests, and you'll see kind of how negative the industry can be. So be nice, be kind, like number one. And I would say that like when you approach a PR, understand the problem at hand. And so like if you're doing a UI change, you want to screenshot what it is that you did and put it in the PR, so the reviewer can be like, just have as much context as possible. So the context matters, and you want to teach, coders to add that context to the PR so people know what it is that you're trying to do. I'd say so. Just approach the context, and then the second thing is this is just kind of a big thing for me. If you like, there should be a test file. So I just do Command F and just find tests. And I'll just go right quickly, and if there's no test, it's like, all right, does this require a test? Yes, blocked. Like the test is the great area to see what your code is actually doing. So first, like high level, look at the function names, maybe collapse things, pull the branch or whatever, collapse things, and look at the function names and see like, are these comprehensive? Is it testing all of the cases that I think are useful? And this could be an integration test or whatever. But if not, add a comment and say, hey, I think, there's some, it might be beneficial to add some detail to this test and test this case. And then once the test looks good, you want to gauge complexity. Like, what are they doing? And is it overly complex? And maybe they didn't understand that there was like a library that we built like 3 years ago that does everything that we've been doing. So again, context inside the architecture and the code base is really, really beneficial. So you'll want kind of a senior to be there to review, but also juniors to learn. And then like at the very bottom of the tone and pull, I would say semantics, like, and general errors and that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know, like maybe there's a better way of doing problem X, Y, and Z. And then I don't even look at a pull request if the tests haven't passed. I think it's just a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah, and I've seen in every company, big or small, there's always processes, like you just said, when you don't see a test file, you will immediately block it, right?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of times that something is very urgent. Let's say yeah, exactly. Or there's a senior developer who's like, I have made this change and I've changed like 25 files. Please quickly approve my PR. I want to merge it and deploy.
Yeah.
Do we still follow all the processes there, or are exceptions allowed?
No. This is this is if nothing's on fire. Asterisk. Like there is a completely different. Like, first of all, you should have a test, but if that means that, this is why I think being well-rounded as a developer really matters, because you need to understand the severity of the issue. Like, is the company losing money? I'm going to fix this. I'm going to deploy the fix right now. I'm going to branch right off of master, push a hot fix. We're going to tell the entire team to, notify. It's a different procedure. But I think part of being a good engineer is knowing when to take path A or path B. So absolutely, if there's something that needs to be fixed and a senior engineer knows how to, or anyone knows how to do it, I think that, number one thing is involving people. But that being said, that is not the time to take shortcuts if you're losing money, I promise. Because if you take a shortcut to solve the problem quickly, that could turn into a much bigger issue. And so, let's just say, I don't know, let's say you're running Python or something and you have access to the shell in production. And you know that this script will fix. Would you copy and paste that into the shell in production with just haphazardly? Probably not. Why? Because money. That's why. And so you'll want to have some processes, and an organization and a team can have a code red process, and those are really good because in that moment when you're on fire, you don't want to lean into your intuitions. You want to lean into processes. That will save you. So yeah, totally different.
Yeah. So having a good balance is important, and it can be a slippery slope. If someone is allowed to just go ahead with the code, then other people will also start maybe trying to do it sometimes. So I think it's nice to have some people in the team who are very strict, who are never allow this, and some people who are a bit flexible, so that it can be a good balance of both.
Yeah, we could a good example is why have 5 tickets that fixes 5 things that are really close to each other? Have 1 ticket and test those 5 things. Do you know how much time that wastes in an SDLC? And that's just leaks, right?
Counter argument, and there's this other school of thought as well on this, sure, where people say that each pull request should be atomic. Right? So it should be just, contained on the topic that, just one single topic. You fix just one thing, or you add one new feature in one pull request. So contained in itself. So now something that happens a lot with especially junior developers is when you're working, let's say, on a bug or maybe on a new feature, and you're programming that, and while doing that, you look back at the code you wrote, let's say 6 months ago. And then you look at that and you feel oh my God, okay, I was such a novice. Now I know better ways to handle the same kind of code and stuff. And you're very inclined to change that piece of code in your, in the same pull request, right? Even if you just want to change the font color or make the smallest change in the same pull request. So there's this other school of thought that says that should absolutely be not allowed. So yeah, so what are your thoughts on that?
I love this topic. And my first response is it depends. It depends on how quickly you can get stuff out in the first place. So if you happen to be in an organization where you're I can get my, let's say you want to refactor something, if you want to get that out if you're able to get that out really quickly, get your feature out first and then refactor really, really quickly, then I think that it should be more strict because you get more benefits for being more strict. But if you work in an organization where, let's say, the release cycle is every 6 months, that's a real thing. It exists. I used to work in a genetics laboratory, and our software release cycle was forever. So what would happen? Devs wanted a refactor. So the only way that they could get it in was by making massive pull requests. Massive pull requests are bad. Why are they bad? Because it's hard to review. It's hard to review because there's so much context and so much time, and you don't want to derail the reader, right? So that's a huge thing. So if you're combining refactory code with a feature, it's not one context, it's 2 contexts. So I like as a rule of thumb, the atomic nature of a pull request is probably the best way to go. But that's not the real world. The real world is you have a lot of constraints and you're I got to get this stuff done. I got to fix this. I'm being hounded by this person over here, and I'm just not going to be able to get, I want to change this font color, and I don't want to spend the hour and a half overhead that it requires to do that one change. So push it. Put a comment. Say, I know this is out of context, but this is part of something that I'm working on in this ticket, blah, blah, blah. So just communicate, and I think at least for me, that's totally fine.
Right. Why I asked you this question was because I wanted to know your take as an engineering manager, because I've seen managers where like they're so worried, they don't think about the context, but they're so worried about following the processes that they have created like so strictly that even to change, like for example, a font color, they want the developer to raise a Jira and then do a new PR to just like for the specific Jira, which really like pisses the developers off.
Yeah, like I said, the best developers are well-rounded and not overly pedantic, right? Like they're not overly like focused on their process. Like I think what makes a good engineering leader is realizing that you could be completely wrong. And if you were right yesterday, you might be wrong today. You have to accept that. And I think that like knowing that is really the key, the huge key to success for your team, is being able to know when to break your own rules.
100%, yes, I agree with that.